Sport Fishing on the Fly is brought to you by Maui Jim Sunglasses. First Tellurium Corp., the future of mining. And Hardy Rods and Reels.
G'day folks, welcome back to On the Bench. Today I'm going to tie the black Ostrich Herl Mayfly, black and gray. I originally got this pattern off Sport Fishing on the Fly, one of their old episodes from Lac de Roche. Thank you to Dwayne Morris for pointing that out for me. He fishes that fly quite a bit up in the Caribou, the original pattern. The original pattern was tied by Ray Rao for Little Fort Fly Shop for Steve Jennings. And this is just a variation, color variation of it. So make sure you have these materials handy before you tie the fly. For hook, I'm using a size 14 Nymph hook by Tiemco, and it's 2x heavy and 3 times long. You could use a 4 times long hook as well for this. For thread, I'll be using Semperfli Nano Silk in 18-0. Totally use just classic black thread, doesn't have to be Nano Silk. For the tail, I'm using Coq de Leon. It's like a brown and black speckled color. For the Shellback and Wingcase, I'm using black pheasant tail. The body is gray Ostrich Herl. For the rib, you can use wire, any color of wire. I'll be using Micro Metal by Semperfli in black. Or you could use the original fly, use like an invisible thread, like probably like a mono thread or something. I've also used black Nano Silk for the rib. And then for the legs, you could pretty much use any kind of a speckled feather. You could go back to the Coq de Leon and just tie these in for legs to match your tail. I have different colors of hen that I use on this fly, and also pheasant rump, the tiny pheasant rump feathers. As long as it has a little bit of modeling or speckling to it. This is the Brahma hen by Whiting in gray. I've done a few in this color, the gray mottled. And it's just like Indian hen, works good too. So pretty much your choice. Or you could even use the black pheasant tail for your legs. So I've gone ahead and laid a good base of Nano Silk onto my hook. And I previously I waxed the Nano Silk so that the body has a little bit of wax on it. If you've never used Nano Silk or GSP thread, it's very slippery. It's always good to use wax with it. So next I'm just going to take my Coq de Leon, and I'm just going to pull about, half dozen straight out from the stem and pull those off. And I like using Coq de Leon for the tail. Although if you don't have it, you could totally use pheasant or hen. That's fine. I use those in quite a few of my mayflies. But Coq de Leon is very strong, and it's got that really nice speckling that the mayflies have. You don't want it too long of a tail, maybe just a little less than the length of the body. I'm just going to tie that in. Make a couple of wraps, and then I'm just going to adjust my tail to make sure it's the length I want it. That's about right. Take a couple of wraps backwards, and then I'm going to go underneath this tail, and then a wrap, and then another wrap underneath it, and that just holds it up. Really nice. Another thing you can do if you want to split the tail of your mayflies, you can come in between the whole clump, and that sort of splits them a little bit. And I'm just going to tie that down and snip off these butt ends. Next, you can take your ribbing material. The original fly, Ron used invisible thread, so like a mono thread, I think it was. And this Micro Metal in black, it's kind of a gray color, almost the same as the ostrich. It's also very strong, and that's why I'm using it. I like the look that it gives. Just going to tie that in. Right down to the tail without bending the tail. And then next you can take your shellback material, so that's the pheasant tail. I got it in black. The reason I love using the black pheasant tail, if you can see that sheen on the tips? It's almost a peacock green color. And Fish just love this. They love this material. I tie one of my leeches out of that, and it's kind of like a Carry Special leech, and yeah, the fish love that color. Any of the pheasant tail, they all have a sheen on them. So I'm just going to take it, I'm going to even up. I've taken maybe about 10 pieces or so. I'm going to wax my thread, and I'm going to tie it in. I've just cut the tips flush. I'm going to tie it in by the tips because it gets larger as you go up the feather. So it'll maintain a really nice profile to this mayfly. Keep that on. Oh, I think I slipped there and got some on the bottom. I'm just going to redo that. Just bring your thread up nice and close. There we go. Tie that in. Now next, you can take your body material. I'm using this beautiful gray ostrich color. Love this color for mayflies, and that's, I think, what the original was tied with, gray ostrich. And I'm just going to take and choose one good strand. They're all pretty good on this one. And I'm only going to use one for the body, and I'm tying it in by the butt. I'm just going to snip the end off it. It's a lot stronger at the butt, and it's pretty much all the same size all the way down the feather, unlike peacock herl. So I like to do it that way. I'm going to wax my thread again. And I'm actually going to wind it back to here. And I've just taken and peeled a little bit off the bottom so that I have a little bit of bare stem to tie onto. Just shorten your thread up. Tie that down. And now if you want to work on a little taper to your body, you can make it have a little taper. I generally keep my mayflies very thin, and that's why the ostrich herl is really great, because it gives the appearance of gills without being, and it also slims down when you're fishing it. Sorry, I've just got a little piece of fuzz on my thread. There we go. Next, I'm just going to put a little bit of a whip finish in here before I wind my body material up. And I've stopped at about the 2/3 point of the shank, where I want my thorax to start. You can just take your ostrich. You can use hackle pliers if you prefer. I don't use them very often. Lucky I have small fingers. And then just start winding touching turns side by side up the hook. It gives that beautiful gill appearance. I have a couple of patterns I do with the ostrich for mayflies, and they work really well. The feather duster is one of them. And I have another mayfly as well I'll be showing very soon. That's very easy to tie. So when I bring it right up to my thread, and then tie it off. And I like to put a couple locking wraps in front of that. Just snip away your stem. Next, you can, just take and moisten your fingers. And I'm just going to pull that ostrich down. Give me a nice flat area for my shellback to lay on. So it's like a full back fly, basically. Just using different materials, that's all. Just tie that down. Got a nice back on there. And then I like to do a couple of locking wraps before cutting it off. Then next you can take your ribbing material. I like to do one complete turn at the back. And you can totally use like black wire and like mono invisible thread. Black nano silk thread makes really good rib as well. I've done a couple with it. because it's so strong. I just use a bigger size, like a 12-0 or an 8-0, depending on the size of the mayfly. And I'm just trying to wiggle it through this ostrich without trapping too many of the fibers down. You can use your thumb to just hold them down. So take your time doing the rib. No rush. It was a bit of a rush. Got to get out fishing eventually. So got about 5 ribs or so on there. And I'm just going to wrap a few more times. I usually do this with my wire. If I'm using wire on my mayflies, I just wrap the thorax a little bit just to give it a little bit of weight at the front. Not much. I don't often use beaded mayflies. I should probably, like I do in the river and stuff, but not in the lake I don't. I use my lines to get to the depth that I want. But you could put a bead on here, for sure. And I just folded that back and tied over it. Holds it in really strong that way. Next, take your Wingcase material, which is also the pheasant. So I'm just going to grab a larger piece than I did for the shellback, because I want it just to be a bit thicker. I'm going to snip actually a little bit a ways down from the butt ends. I don't want it right at the butt because it's just a bit thick there, and I don't like how it lays down. I'm just going to flip it over, wax my thread again. So I've got a chunk of about probably 12 to 15. I might even add just a few more. It looks like I don't have quite enough. I'm just going to add a few more of those. Yeah, that's a little better. So once again, just wind your thread up nice and close to the hook, and then you can just do a pinching loop, which I don't pinch much. My fingers don't pinch small materials well, so I'm not so good at that. I have my own method. And now, if you're not coming back far enough, you want to go a little bit farther back, and you find your nano silk is slipping like that, just add a little bit of wax to it. Anytime it's slipping or sliding off the material. And just get it and measure it, see how, okay, that's about how I want it. Maybe bring one wrap back. Next, I'm going to take my thorax material, which again is the Ostrich Herl, and this time I'm going to grab 2 pieces. Because I want it a little bit thicker than my body. And once again, same way, I'm going to snip it off at the butt ends and just peel a tiny bit of the feather off the stems, like that. Wax your thread. Just catch those. And I'm leaving a really good space here at the front, at least a hook eye length. I want my platform nice and smooth going down, but I want this space here for my head and my legs that are to come. So I go just a little bit forward, just a tiny bit. Now you can just take your 2 pieces, wind them together, building a nice fuzzy thorax. Right to your thread. Tie that off. And you can snip away the butt ends. So next you can just take the feather of your choice. I've got a number of options. You could use the same coque de lion that you use for the tail and just tie it in on both sides, a few pieces each. I've got some mottled gray Brahma hen, partridge, the smaller feathers. These are nice because they have that nice sheen on the tips of them. And also I've got Indian hen, and that's what I'm going to use for this one. So I'm just going to take and isolate the tip of the feather. So the tip there. And I'm just going to hold tight to this right here, this part, and then just pull the tip out of there so it's gone. And then I'm just going to bring as many legs forward as I want in my fly, and everything else I'm going to pull down. So I like a good, half dozen or so on each side. Make sure they're about the right length there. So I like to measure it to go about almost to the hook point, is where I like my legs to end. So I'm just going to hold that right. Actually, I'm just going to wax my Nano silk first. I flattened down the ostrich with some water. And I'm just going to pull these legs down below so they're out of my way. So I'm just laying that right on top. I'm going to hold it with my one hand and then just bring a couple of wraps over top and then just check the length. It might be just a tad long, so I'm just going to pull mine forward like a very small amount and then lock it in. Take a couple of wraps over top of that stem and then it won't pull out. Snip that. And then next you can just pull your legs out of the way. Looks like I got a couple more on one side than I do the other side. You can always use a pair of tweezers and pull them out of there if you got too many or whatever, which I might end up having to do with this fly. So then just pull your wing case forward, and I like to flatten it with my thumbnail. I like to flatten that wing case out. Make sure your legs are back, your wing case is pulled forward. So I've got this one errant leg I'm not too happy with. Just one sec. Let's pull that out of the way. Deal with that later. And then just holding that tight, you just make a couple of good tight wraps. Lock it down. And then I like to go in front a couple of times and then back and behind before cutting my thread. Or, sorry, before cutting the tips off. I'm already worried about cutting my thread. I've done it so many times with mayflies. So I like to also, I never used to do this, but I like to put a whip finish in before I cut my pheasant tail. I've lost a few too many wing cases by not doing that. You accidentally cut your thread or whatever, at least it's got a whip finish in it already. And what usually works best with these downturn eyes is just to lay your scissors right flat against them before you can just pull your material and chop it. It might be left. These aren't the sharpest scissors anymore. I'm just going to flatten that with my thumbnail before I go over top of it. Because it's the 18 Nano silk, if something's sticking up there, it'll take quite a few wraps to hammer it down. And then you can just take your whip finisher and finish. Yeah, like so. One little piece, I can see it on the camera sticking forward there. And I always like to take two. With Nano silk, I don't bother using any kind of head cement. It's really strong thread. And 2 whip finishes should hold that really well. Just make sure it's all back there. And then you can just pull your thread up and chop it off. And that's it. That's my black ostrich mayfly. It's the black and brown one I created. Thanks for joining me on this edition of On the Bench. Take care, everyone. As always, conserve the waters and tight lines.